Hey, happy Friday. This week Meta had a really bad week with mass layoffs. Crypto had a terrible week with half the industry apparently collapsing, and China had new chip bans, but this time from Germany, weirdly. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video is sponsored by Brilliant. Okay, we're starting the brief with LG, who showed off a stretchy 12-inch display that uses micro LEDs. It's got a 100 pixels per inch resolution that can be stretched 20% up to a 14-inch display and should be useful for uneven surfaces such as clothes. Next up, MediaTek's flagship Dimensity 9200 chip was announced this week, built on TSMC's 4nm process with a 64-bit only design. Performance improvements are modest with 10 and 12% jumps, but efficiency gains should be major with 25% less power consumption and less heat as well. Let's see how that stacks up against Qualcomm, who should be launching their flagship chip in just 4 days. Next, GitHub, the world's biggest code repository, introduced Hey GitHub to their AI coding tool, Copilot, so programmers can use their voice to describe what they want to have, and then GitHub can code it for them. Wild. Then someone made a working foldable iPhone using iPhone X internals and Motorola Razr parts, taking almost a year to complete, also wild. And while we are at iPhones, the sales of the 14 Pro series are expected to be hit hard by the catastrophic COVID closures in Foxconn's China factory in Zhengzhou, which mainly produces products for Apple. Next, in AI news, Google showed off an AI technique for turning 2D images into high-resolution 3D fly-throughs, really cool, and AI image service Midjourney hit version 4, making another massive leap ahead in what's possible with even simple text inputs. Then YouTube announced that YouTube Music and Premium paid memberships are now at 80 million users, showing 60% growth year over year. That's pretty impressive. It now makes subscription revenues a major part of YouTube's business and something that Elon Musk is probably looking at very enviously. And speaking of Twitter, the silliness there just keeps continuing. The company announced a new level of verification this week, called official accounts, with a hilariously bad double checkmark system, just to have Elon himself kill the whole system after just 2 hours of it being alive. And then, as Twitter Blue verified accounts were launched, people of course totally paid $8 to impersonate everyone from Mario to Joe Biden, just like literally everyone said they would. And since many of the moderation teams were fired, of course it's going to be almost impossible to contain all this mess on the long term. Of course, massive advertisers like Nintendo, who were trolled, pulled their spending from the platform, but Elon basically used emojis to say that actually this is all fine, because Twitter made $8 from the pranks. That is sound business logic. Okay, that's it for the brief, and for my first story of the week, let's talk about all the grim headlines coming out about Meta this week. Although, I have to say, I'm actually a little bit less pessimistic about them than most people seem to be. Let me explain. So this week, Mark Zuckerberg announced that Meta was laying off 11,000 employees, or 13% of the company's workforce. And that is a massive turnaround from the company's previous hiring trajectory. Zuckerberg took responsibility and said that he'd overhired, misjudging post-pandemic growth, and Meta had gone from 45,000 to 87,000 employees since the pandemic hit. Reportedly, the 3 key areas where teams are not getting massively downsized were the metaverse, artificial intelligence, which I suppose is related to Reels, and advertising, but all the other teams had a really rough time. To Zuckerberg's credit, the layoff was actually relatively well handled. I mean, he owned up to the mistake himself. There is pretty good severance payment for those who were laid off, including healthcare, and there was no other massive drama that we know of, at least. That is a major difference from Elon's haphazard firing of half of his company, just to then get sued by them right away, which then went on to the company begging to rehire people that they had just fired, and then to them announcing that suddenly the company's permanent remote work arrangement was permanently cancelled without Elon even informing his own HR department of the decision. Not bad. So yeah, doing better than Elon this week is not like a huge achievement, but Zuckerberg apparently managed to achieve at least that. Okay, my second story of the week is going to be the rapid and violent collapse of the cryptocurrency exchange FTX, which is marking some of crypto's darkest days yet. In short, FTX, one of the world's largest and most respected crypto exchanges, collapsed suddenly and violently this week. The company raised $400 million from some of the world's biggest investors, including SoftBank, at a valuation of $32 billion just earlier this year, and VC giant Sequoia invested into them in 2021 as well, but then it all collapsed in just a week or two, turning founder Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF, from altruistic genius billionaire to just dust. Like most crypto founders before him, SBF of course also did the legendary classic move of announcing that everything was actually fine right as his company was collapsing, and like a day before everything got wiped out and turned out to be definitely not fine. It's a classic move that apparently all of them seem to be doing. Within a day, he then confidently announced that fierce rival exchange Binance would bail them out after doing due diligence, but then that didn't happen either. That is a rapid fall if I've ever seen one, and Binance, well, Binance has truly deserved this meme. Now what is wild is that FTX really was kind of seen as one of, if not the safest homes for trading crypto and storing assets as well, with big serious investors on board and the history of FTX themselves bailing other exchanges out. But alas, they turned out to not be safe at all, and as a giant, they of course crashed half the crypto world with them as well, which was already standing on shaky legs this year. Now explaining their downfall in detail would honestly be pretty boring and it would take a whole episode, so I'll just give you a very quick overview. They essentially over-leveraged themselves, so they did a lot of risky stuff. They got into fights with their competitors, for example, with Binance themselves, and then when they tried to get bailed out by Binance, Binance decided, actually not. All of which then caused many people to have panic and to withdraw their assets, and people apparently withdrew around $6 billion in 72 hours. That is pretty brutal. Anyway, SBF came out publicly to say, "I effed up," which is nice, but of course helped absolutely no one. And this massive collapse that showed people just rushing to take billions out of the system appears to be way bigger than any previous crypto collapse like Mt. Gox or Celsius, and would have likely caused even major non-crypto banks to collapse if that happened to them as well. It's a fun time for anyone in crypto overall. Anyway, for the third story of the week, I actually have new chip bans for China, but this time they're from Germany, and there's actually a US workaround. So to begin with, the German government blocked or is preparing to block Chinese companies trying to do two different deals with German chip tech companies. First, ERS Electronic, a producer of thermal solutions for semiconductor testing and packaging, was supposed to be sold but got blocked. And then second, Almos, a fairly large Dortmund-based supplier of specialized automotive chips with more than 100 million ICs shipped, was supposed to sell one of their chip fabs to a Chinese buyer, but was told not to. The ERS block kind of makes sense as their tech for cooling wafers using air is A, pretty sensitive, and B, pretty unique, but Almos apparently wanted to get rid of its fab as it is using a Samsung foundry to produce some of their chips in a fabless model anyway, so they might actually be quite unhappy about not being allowed to sell. Anyway, Germany seems to be joining the US in saying no to China's chip ambitions, and Nvidia this week, talking about the US, actually found a way around some of the US bans. Nvidia said that it will sell an AI chip called the A800 to China, which just seems to be a dumbed down A100 GPU, but with artificially reduced chip-to-chip speeds that allow it to get past the US export control limits. Nvidia claims that the performance lock cannot be programmed to be exceeded, but given Nvidia's track record of claiming that their 30 series cards were unhackable just before they got hacked, that might actually mean that the block is just some elaborate coding challenge. And if solving such coding challenges either for fun or for profit sounds like something that you would like to do, then check out my sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is the best place online to study science, maths, computer science, and engineering, and their courses cover everything from beginner to advanced levels. Whether you want to become a software developer or a physicist, or you just want to brush up on your algebra skills, they have you covered, and their courses are all designed to be super efficient by being extremely interactive. Each big concept that they cover is broken down into smaller chunks that build into a complete picture, and each one is then practiced right away with an exercise to make sure that the learnings actually stick. Less reading, more doing, thinking, and actual understanding, and courses are actually designed by professionals from institutions like Microsoft, Google, MIT, and more, so they're teaching the fundamentals that you'd actually need to know at those institutions. It's a super effective way to learn, and they work great on both desktops and phones. You can of course try Brilliant for free at brilliant.org/TFC, and the first 200 people who use that link to sign up will also get 20% off their annual premium subscription. So check them out, happy learning, and I'll see you next Friday.